developers. Hello, developers. Welcome to another episode of Google Pay Live integrations on Android. Today, we have a fantastic lineup. We have the Checkout.com team with us, who will guide us through a live integration on Android. They will use their newly SDK on Android to accept Google Pay as a payment method and finally do a transaction. Before I pass on to the Checkout.com team, let me introduce you to Jose. Jose, how's it going?
Hey Tommy, how's it going? It's good to see you here. It feels like it's been a while. I'm really excited because we have a new SDK, so can't wait.
Yeah, and also we are 6 people in the live stream. That's a new record, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So what we are trying to achieve today, together with the checkout team, is as you know, if you are accepting Google Pay on Android and also on the web, you need a payment service provider. Checkout.com is a payment service provider, and they have SDKs on Android, on the web, to help you with that. And today, they're going to show you on how you can do that on Android with the newly released SDK. And for that, let me hand over to Sunghun, who will introduce you to the team.
Thank you, Domi. Cool. I'm assuming my screen is shared. Cool.
It is.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to present Checkout.com's flagship end-to-end payment interface product, Flow, specifically Flow Android Mobile SDK. I'm going to briefly introduce you to the product itself so that you know what it is. But then, of course, the majority of the focus today will be the live coding section. During that, we'll demonstrate the end-to-end integration from the payment session setup with Checkout server, initializing our Flow component, to payment methods setup and integration, focusing on Google Pay. So before we dive into the product and live demo, let me quickly introduce our team who developed this wonderful product. I'm Sunghun, product manager of the mobile SDKs at Checkout.com, including the Flow SDK that we're going to present today. Along with me, we have Chintan and Fabio joining us today to live demo our Android SDK as our Android engineers. And we also have Jheng-Hao joining, our engineering manager as well. Cool. I won't take too much of a time introducing the product, but to give you a bit of a background, Flow SDK is a clever bit of code that we have developed to help our merchants to boost conversions, to help them stay compliant, and also to help them enter new markets and customer faster. Our merchants accept their payments using our customizable building components, all through one simple integration. To touch base on some of our key value proposition, boost conversion and acceptance rate. Our merchants lift their payment performance, mainly the conversion and acceptance rate, with our pre-built optimizations and live optimization that dynamically offer the customers their preferred payment methods based on details like location, currency they're processing with, what device they're currently using, etc. Secondly, we help our merchants to stay compliant and reduce the fraud attempts. Flow meets the industry standards like PCI DSS, that stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, to help reduce the compliance burden from our merchants to us, so that we ensure that all sensitive data does not touch their server, it only goes through our server, so that Checkout manage your payment compliance. And we also use device fingerprinting to detect and prevent fraud attempts, among others. Lastly, we help our merchants to reach new markets and new customers faster, as Flow continuously introduce new and most relevant payment methods from our global payment networks at Checkout. Our merchants can simply enable, disable new payment methods and reach new markets and customers with single integration and change of configuration, without needing to spend development effort for each payment method integration. That being said, that is a generic introduction to Flow. Flow, specifically for Flow for web, has been our merchants' go-to integration method for the past year plus. And now we have launched our brand new mobile native SDK, Android SDK, in January this year, bringing all the benefit that I mentioned plus others to our mobile SDKs so that our merchants can serve app-based customers as well. And this is going to be the focus of our demo today, Flow for Mobile Android SDK. Cool. Of course, you can ask any questions about the product during the session today, but I'll now hand over to Chintan, who's going to demonstrate the creation of the payment session with our server and also initializing the Flow component. Thank you.
Chintan, before you take over, yeah, I want to emphasize that please, developers, ask as many questions as you have in the chat. Also, if you prefer to follow up with us after the live stream, make sure to check out the video description where you find a link to our Discord channel, Payments Discord channel, where you can ask questions around Google Pay, around payments in general. Chintan.
Hey, the mute.
I think you're still muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, fine.
All right, can hear you now. Great.
Yeah, fine. Hi, team. Today I will walk you through these slides to give you a high-level overview of what we will cover. After that, Fabio and I will jump into the live coding session to explore the implementation detail. Overview of that, I will cover these first two slides, and then later these two slides implementation will cover from the Fabio sides. Let's start first step. As we can see in the right diagram, first step is from the merchant side to create the payment session. So basically from the merchant server, they need to invoke the payment session data from the checkout.com server, and checkout.com server will provide the response with the payment session data, which that payment session data contains the payment session ID, token, and secret. And once the details of this merchant will have, they need to pass to the merchant tab. As you can see here that merchant need to prepare the checkout component configuration using a Flow SDK. So passing those payment session data, they can prepare the UI customization to make the fancy of the Flow SDK matching with their app design. Once they prepare the configuration, the second step is to initialize the checkout component factory. We can see here that this is the entry point of the Flow SDK public API wrapper, where merchant need to create the factory and initialize the instance. And the step 3, once merchant initialize the factory, checkout Flow SDK will provide the public API interface, which is a checkout components, and return to the merchant tab saying that, okay, we have this public API interface, which has several method. For example, creating a payment method name. So merchant needs to then create a payment method name. For example, they would like to create a flow component, then call this method from the checkout component as a create flow component. Then under the hood, checkout Flow SDK will provide a payment method component interface to the merchant tab, which is basically a life cycle of the payment method, which has a several life cycle method. For example, render the composable UI into the merchant tab and loading all these payment method components. So this way they can create a flow component, card component, Google Pay, and so on. So now next step is to jump into I will explain how a create payment session work from the checkout. So this is our public documentation where you can find the details about full integration of Android and iOS Flow SDK. This is first step to create a payment session. Before that, merchant need to create a test account with us. Then using our dashboard, they need to create a public key and a secret key. Then we have these details about how they can create a server request to the checkout.com, which is our web services. This is our request example, and this is a response where the merchant will get the payment session token, secret, ID, and so on. Later, once they will have this payment session details, then they need to integrate our checkout Flow SDK. We already published it to the Maven Central. This is the integration step. They need to add a project level Gradle file, Maven URLs for as mentioned here. Then into the app level Gradle file, they need to add our dependency, Flow SDK dependency. Now jump into the our sample app. So this is our this is the high level overview how merchant can create the payment session. Now, as we can see from my Android Studio, we have a sample
Chintan,
project.
I have
Yeah.
a question, if I may interrupt. Sorry.
Yeah.
So one question about this. Let's say, so do you have, what paths of integration do I have available? Like I can imagine 2 scenarios or 3. There's let's say I'm building a really simple app and I don't really care too much about how my checkout looks. So I want to get up and running as quickly as possible. Is that something I'll be able to do with the Flow SDK?
Yes,
like a
of
quick
course.
configuration, maybe defaults, and just like getting started as quickly as I can.
Yeah, so that's what I will jump into that part detail, but let me explain
Great.
through this. So this is our quick introduction how they can use straight away our checkout flow SDK. So for example, they need to create a Google Pay component. So this is the configuration, and using that configuration invoke the factory, and using that factory just create the component. That job done. So for example, creating a flow component, and it will create a flow component, and then they need to call this render functionality from there. Then it will straight over render into the merchant app.
Got
Does
it.
it answer your question? Yeah. Cool, thanks. Let me jump to my ID. Yeah. So here we have our public our sample app, which will live available in our public repo soon. So first step as create a payment session. Let me open this sample app running device. Yeah. So on this pay component button, we will get the payment session data. So I will just invoke this. Then under the hood, we already implemented that create payment session. So for example, if we can see this, I will have this data from the checkout server saying that ID, token, and secret. I remove these details, but yeah, that's the first step we need to start integrated. So once let me go through this create payment session object. The first important things while creating a payment session, merchant need to enable explicitly payment method. For example, I would like to integrate only the Google Pay, then they just need to pass a Google Pay data here, and our session details will have only under the hood detail about the Google Pay, and Flow SDK will render accordingly that. So this is the first step. Then now let's jump into the create a checkout components. I will create one function here. Checkout component.
Actually, Chintan, while you're doing that, we do have a couple of questions regarding Flutter support. Maybe Sunghun or someone else can give a little hint on if you have plans to support Flutter as well.
I've noticed that. Yes, that's a very good question. And I also saw a question about iOS SDK as well. I really didn't mention that during our presentation. We have iOS and Android SDK natively available now. Flutter and React Native SDK, we have a roadmap to start building this year. We don't have official Flutter or React Native SDK out as of now. However, the good news is we're actually seeing quite a few merchants on this multi-platform, hybrid platform like Flutter to actually use our native Android SDK and integrate with the quote-unquote bridge function. So that's also available, and we have some documentation we're preparing to guide merchants who are on Flutter or React Native to use our native SDK. But if your question is specifically having Flutter SDK or React Native, we have a plan for it, but we don't have it live yet.
All right, great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sunghun. Let me start here. So yeah, first of all, I create a checkout components function here. Let me prepare the checkout component configuration. Configuration checkout. I will prepare the payment session data, which I get from the payment session response. This is a payment session token, payment session secret. Then I will pass second option as a context. So yeah, we need to pass context here. And public key, which we initially created from our test account. So here I will use our public key. Then environment we would like to test. So currently it's a sandbox. Then okay, so other thing here is under the hood, our checkout components doing some background operations. So I will add one coroutine for updating the UI. Yeah, so let me add component callback here. Sorry, just a moment. Yeah, so this is our component callback to manage the lifecycle of payment method, which contains on ready, on submit, on success, and on error. So merchant can, let's say, get the detail about, for example, on success, they will have the component, whatever the user is interacting with, for example, Flow Card or Google Pay, they will have all these details about the component, then payment ID, then they can manage the error, of course, in this case. Okay, so now we yeah.
Then I guess you can use all those like states in your callback to maybe print, but also like to update your state as well. That would be a good place for doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you mean to that update the state, right? To update the UI, how we will show into the sample app, right?
Yeah, any state that you use to keep track of changes on, and then you propagate to the UI as well. In this case, I assume in Compose. So would this be a good place to do that? This callbacks.
This callback, I think, is more about like providing the detail, how they can render into the, let's say, how merchant can logically manage those behavior. So,
Understood.
and at the end, if they would like to, let's say, render into the UI, we will have Fabio will cover those part to how actually UI works for that, and according to the stat part as well.
All right, I need to be more patient then. I'll be patient, sorry.
So, yeah. So we created a checkout component configuration. Now we will invoke the checkout component factory. Saying this configuration dot create. So this will provide, while creating this instance, it will provide a public interface about this is like a checkout components. Now, as we can see, it's as a suspend function. So under the hood, we perform a background operation. So we need to add routine for that.
Just a quick reminder, sorry, Chintan, just a quick reminder, if you have questions on the Flow SDK from the checkout team or payments related questions or Google Pay related questions, feel free to ask in the chat. We are here.
Yes, ask. We have 6 people. This is setting a record. So this is your best chance. Ask questions. Today's the day.
Yeah, I can see some nice React versus Flutter discussions in the chat, Jose.
It's been very hot for years now, right? Like it looks like React got the lead, also starting a bit earlier and going really quickly up, really steep curve of adoption. But then like Flutter has been catching up in the last few years. I think last time I checked, they were like really on par. So I think it's a really exciting time for multi-platform developers.
Absolutely.
They are different enough to have a couple of options depending on the skill set of your team or what you prefer. So it's I find it very cool.
Yeah. Right. So in this case, we create a checkout components interface. Using that interface, we create a flow component, and we also provide, let's say, gradual understanding of the checkout error. We have documented everything into the public docs, how merchant gracefully can handle this checkout error. And using that checkout components, now we create a flow component, and I will hand over to the Fabio to create like a Google Pay component, flow component, how end-to-end this payment method work for us. Yeah. Thanks, team. Fabio, handing over to you.
Thanks, Chintan.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So let's deal with this Google Pay button. So
Let's do.
First thing first, I want to flash in here that in the manifest we already had, for the sake of this demo, the metadata needed in order to enable Google Pay on your sample app. Second, what we are going to do now is essentially try to render the button through composable. So let's try to keep things modular and lifecycle aware, and pass a couple of things through Stateflow. So the first thing that I want to pass is the component itself that we just created.
So Fabio, quick question.
Sure.
Does it mean that your flow component actually wraps the button, the Google Pay button, like the call to the create button API, for example? So your component will take care of rendering the actual button, which in turn means that your developers using your SDK do not have to do anything regarding that, correct?
That's exactly correct. There are a lot of things that we do in the background. So the component will handle all the render part. We will go to that in a second. The other thing that I was going to introduce, it's another state flow that we will call it is available. The most difficult thing to write during a live coding experience. So what is this available? It's a suspended function that we essentially use in order to check the availability of each and every payment method. And according to the payment method that we are talking about, it will have different functionality. Specifically for the case of Google Pay, the most two important things that I want to remind in this conversation is that it will populate, for instance, all the allowed payment methods that are needed to inflate the pay button. And second, it will also call in the background the is ready to pay method from the Google Pay API, and and that will return us essentially a Boolean if the value is true. So we are able to render it. Otherwise, false. Otherwise, we set up the callback correctly, and we should see an error if it may happen.
So for the allowed payment methods, does that mean your component actually gets those payment methods from the backend? Meaning if the merchant has configured those methods in your dashboard, let's say, the component automatically fetches those and then only renders, let's say, Visa and MasterCard. If American Express is not configured, is that automatically done with the component?
Kind of, yes. As Chintan mentioned before, one of the params that you parse for creating the payment session are the methods supported. In this case, we are showing card and Google Pay. But for what concern all the rest of the configuration through the dashboard, once we get the call back from the backend, it essentially has everything that it's needed in order to handle everything else from our side.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay, we got the component. We got the state flow written. Let's try to update those.
Just to chime in there, I think one of the powerful thing about Flow that we'll continuously introduce is, as you mentioned, different payment methods. It's not just about card or wallet payment or schemes availability, but also all sort of alternative payment methods, ranging from PayPal, Klarna, but everything. So Flow Web currently support about 22 APMs, and we'll support all of them as well as we go. So yep, the merchant can trigger any type of APM. Also, you can configure it per region, etc.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so the state should be updated correctly now. Let's use it directly in our sample screen. So let's pass it here as well. And finally use the status here.
That sound of your keyboard reminds me of a really old keyboard that my dad had with the big keys. And when you would tap it, it would feel like you would hear all across the house, really. So that's really a good reminder of that.
Thanks.
Do you have one of the old school ones, or?
No, I simply smash the button so hard that it looks like I'm using an old one. Anyhow, we have the state available here. So in our composable, we can simply say that if it's available, we can simply component.value.render. Now, render is another function that belongs to each and every payment method component, that in this case return us the composable for our UI. Now, for those old-fashioned person that are still using and rely only on XML, we got you covered, and we have this method here, provide view, whereby you just give us the container, and this will basically give back the view for those old UI. Now, everything should be set and in place. Let's try to run this code and see how it works.
Moment of truth. Okay, so if to recap, you have created a checkout component, you have configured it with the information that Chintan was passing in, then you have initialized that, and now capturing the result, you're passing that through a state flow that is actually making changes on the UI, because that's what you have as an anchor to update compose. All right, let's see.
Yeah, that's the good part. The bad part is that it's not working.
Oh, perfect.
And yes, but let's look at the bright side. It fails gracefully, it didn't crash the app, and we have an error message. And we simply forgot to deal with the Google Pay flow coordinator. Now, this is well written in our docs, and specifically for the case of Google Pay, we essentially need to implement and provide a flow coordinator that will deal with with things like the life cycle or the activity result. How are we gonna do that? Let's go back a second to the view model. Let's create another couple of mutable state flow first. And another one for holding our Google Pay flow coordinator.
while Fabio is typing, let me fire up another question. Well, it's not a question. It's just this. Maybe Sunghun, you have an idea on what this means. If not, then I would ask Jula to do a follow-up question or post a follow-up question in chat, please.
It's not even a question. It's just like
it's
a
not a
few words
question.
put together. Maybe it's a request.
Maybe.
I think I can answer the first two words quickly. I'm not sure exactly what instant payments here exactly is referring to. But in terms of bulk payouts, the demo we're doing, a lot of it is pay-in, meaning that is client, the customer initiated transactions. But payouts, merchant initiated transactions are also available with Flow. We intend to build, native functionality for merchants to use to do payouts in our roadmap. But starting right now, actually, they can already achieve that as Flow, while what we're demonstrating is end-to-end payment processing for our demo purpose. But we also have different modes. One of the modes is tokenization only mode. What that means is the merchant can create token with their card as the card that user has input, and they get the token back from the callback. And with that token, they can choose to do payout if they wish to, or they can do many different things actually with it. But one of the major use case is they can configure the UI so that it doesn't look like a pay-in experience, but they can build a payout experience and use our flow to capture the card information securely using our SDK and use it to pay out to those customers. So payout is also possible with our SDK.
Nice. Thank you.
So while there was this conversation, I tried to put something else on the code. First thing was adding the flow coordinator into our option. Now, you can notice here that the flow coordinator is expecting a map because we may have different coordinator according to the different payment methods. In here, that's why. In here, we will update our factory, and that should do for the view model. Now, let's deal a second with the coordinator. The importance of having the coordinator is for managing Google Pay flow, as probably mentioned before, and ensuring that the life cycle and the activity result registry works as expected. And there are two main params that we need to pass specifically for Google Pay Flow. One is a context that needs and must implement the view model store owner, the lifecycle owner, and the activity result register owner. And the other one is an handle activity result, but let's fix that in a second. So. So as I was mentioned, here is expecting the context, and I believe that the one provided from the activity should fit the role. The handle activity for result, we will write it as a lambda of result and data. And we'll say view model dot handle activity. And finally, we'll say view model dot flow coordinator. Let's see quickly implement those two methods. This one should be super straightforward since we have everything in place. So Google Pay for coordinator dot update to Google Play for coordinator, and this handle activity result is instead this. Component dot value dot handle activity for result. Exactly. So this is essentially a function that exists in our factory that will deal with the data blob that we do retrieve from the activity result of Google Pay, put it back, extrapolate the data, get the token, and then use it in order to complete the payment flow from our backend perspective. So now we should have everything in place, finger crossed.
Let's see.
Let's see. And yes, oh, lucky me.
Wow, there we go.
The button is there. The button works. The button gives the possibility to, change card and all of that.
Yeah.
Continue the payment. And if we check in our logcat and check for on success, exactly the callback, return the result, and we even have the payment ID returned. And that is essentially how to deal with Google Pay. Now, let me take another 15 seconds in order to show you how complicated it will be instead creating a component to just render the card for dealing with card payment. And here we have it.
That's nice.
Or last thing will be having everything that it's available as a payment method from the payment session. And as you can see, the configuration, once it's there, it works no matter what you do. Because since we are able to provide the view through creating different components, you can customize your UI as you want. You may have the button on top, you may have the payments method side to side. It's up to you. Finally, as Chintan mentioned earlier, this code will be available soon through our GitHub repository, so any developer out there can fork it, can clone it, can play around with it. Dominik, anything from your side?
Yeah, I have one question. When you tried the Google Pay transaction, I saw that your SDK is automatically doing 3D Secure. So this means that if you detect that 3D Secure is needed, your SDK will do that automatically, right?
That's correct. Our backend essentially once deal with the payment request, it return us a success or any kind of, let's say, action that needs to be done. In this case, as you was fleshed out through the demo, we show that there was a 3DS going around. So yeah, this is why personally I'm kind of proud of the product, since with few lines of code is able to maintain all this complexity in place.
Yes, that's awesome.
So you can have, I guess this answers the question that I asked at the very beginning. I think this fulfills the case in which you may decide to go for a fully customized UI, in which you would go and work on every component separately, right, as you did at the very beginning. And then if you just wanted to have the simplest possible checkout form, then you can just say, hey, draw me the component flow, and then just show me all the options available right there, right?
That's exactly correct. There are options in the configuration for our components that allow you, let's say, to even further customize, like providing your color palette, or you can even customize it even further by providing any kind of local that it's even unsupported and, let's say, specific for only this session or only this other session.
Very nice. Yeah, so since we have one more question here about Flutter, maybe Sunghun, you want to once again mention what your plans are for Flutter?
This is gonna push my roadmap. Yes. Currently, we support out of the box Android and iOS SDK natively. We have a roadmap to support React Native and Flutter SDK over the course of this year and next year as well. Also, I would like to note that we actually have been observing quite a few of our merchants who are on React Native or Flutter stack are actually successfully integrating our native SDKs, i.e. Android and iOS SDK, with the building the bridge between their stack and the native SDK. So if you want to venture that, we will document that soon as well so that you can actually use our Android SDK. In the future, yes, we plan to support various multi-platform SDKs as well.
Cool. And for those currently using the native SDK to do the bridge, you can use we have a plugin for Flutter that takes care of the button. So you could use that to draw the Google Pay button and then still send the requests back to in this case, checkout.com through the plugin. Although I guess you could also technically use directly the bridge that you build with the SDK to draw the Google Pay button there as well. So it sounds like you have a couple of options there. But would be waiting for that. Let us know how those plans evolve to support Flutter and React Native. I think you make a lot of people excited as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one technical question. One more technical question about Kotlin multi-platform. I guess you are not using this behind the scenes, right, Fabio?
No, not at the moment. We are probably thinking about trying to, let's say, have some sort of investigation behind the scene in order to explore the functionality of Kotlin multi-platform. But right now, we have so much pressure from the Flutter crow that we definitely have to deal with that first.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thanks.
So when you refer to iOS, they're alluding to iOS in that question. You have an SDK as well, which is like Swift or Objective-C based or something like that.
Right? That's correct. We also have the, let's say, the iOS equivalent, and the integration steps are as close as possible or basically identical between the two platforms. So more or less what you saw here today, well, excluding the part of dealing with composable, of course, it is achievable on iOS by calling the same render function or the same is available function.
Cool. Let us know, Rich Hills, if that answers.
All right, great. Thank you so much, checkout.com team. This was a really interesting presentation. Really looking forward for the Flow SDK to get rid of the beta label and see some adoption there. It's really nice how easy it was. I think it was impressive how easy it was for switching between Google Pay and the card component. This is super nice. It's also super cool that the SDK handles 3D Secure automatically, even for Google Pay, if the user selects an F Pen in Google Pay. So thank you so much. As Fabio said, we're gonna update the video description to include a link to the demo app Fabio and Chintan presented. So stay tuned to that. Come back to the video and check the links. Cool. Great. With that, thank you so much. I hope you join for the next stream. And happy coding. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.